Hello and welcome to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker at large. This week, I have asked Rachel Bernstein to come back because I wanted to discuss with her some aspects of cult recovery and recovery in general and getting help from counselors and licensed therapists and that sort of thing that we haven't really talked about or gone into a lot of detail on. And I thought that consulting a licensed therapist who has 20 years plus experience in this field might be a good person, knowledgeable person to talk about with this. So Rachel, of course, readily agreed because she was actually very interested in discussing this topic and how people can seek help, what good help consists of, and also what kind of things you should be watching out for that might be red flags or danger signals when you first make contact with a therapist or somebody who's putting themselves out there as somebody who's going to help you. How do you know that you're going to be getting good help from them, right? That is basically what we start with in this, and we end up talking about quite a bit of very interesting things around that subject. So for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, I will beg your indulgence because while we were doing the Skype recording, there was some hiccups and a couple bandwidth internet problems, which are not her fault or mine. It was just sort of a bad connection in a couple points. So there's a little bit of flickering here and there. You don't need to tell me about it in the comments. I already know about it. But the audio, this being a podcast, the most important thing for me on this was the audio, and that came through perfectly. So despite a couple moments where there are some video hiccups, I think you'll find this information very, very useful. So here is Rachel Bernstein. Hey, Rachel. Thanks for being on my show again. I thought this time we might talk about something that I think is something that a lot of people could use some advice and direction on, and that is we have talked about, and of course your whole profession is, giving destructive cult exit counseling or therapy and couples counseling and relationship counseling and that sort of thing. So you do this for a living, right? But a question that I've had, bouncing around in my head, and I know that if I'm thinking it, other, my listeners must be as well, is how do you go about finding counseling or therapists who, one, know what they're talking about, and two, aren't going to give you a bum steer? You don't want to jump from, especially for ex-cult members, you don't want to jump from one cult into another. You're in a fairly fragile place, and you can't expect people coming out of destructive cults to be fully educated on all the things that maybe we'd like them to be fully educated on. So what advice can you give? Maybe start off this with what kind of things should they be looking for? How do they find good counselors, and how do they avoid ones that might not be a good fit for them? How do we start with that?
Okay, it's a great question, and it's a really important topic. It happens so often that, as you said, that I see people in my office who have been harmed by people who were supposedly supposed to be healing them, and they didn't know how to safeguard themselves from it, and they didn't know the questions to ask. And a lot of times we're socialized to be polite, so we put up with a lot more than we should, especially in a therapeutic setting, because we defer to the person in charge thinking that somehow they must know what they're doing. That's not necessarily the case. So I think there's an interplay there, right, where we kind of tolerate more and come back for more sessions just because we're told to, or that then we'll get the answers if we keep coming back, which is very culty. So right. So how do you know? You've had that experience, right?
Oh yeah. I know we haven't really done anything for you yet, but if you come back for 2 more sessions, I swear everything will be just wonderful. We don't want that at all for people.
I wish I had a carrot to dangle as a visual. I'm looking for one, but I already ate my salad. But yes. It is. It's people are kind of waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting for the wonderful gifts that they're supposed to be receiving that they can't receive anywhere else. So how do you know? Part of the thing that you want to be able to do is check on the person's background. You have the right to have that information, and that information should be out there. And if it's not out there, just like people research when they buy a used car, all the more so you should research when you're going to someone for health or healing. Who owned this car before, right? Who did this person see, and can you talk to this person? If there really is no website, if there's no information you can get, talking to someone who used to see that person and who left for whatever reason is sometimes a good guide for you. But also picking up on how that person makes you feel at the very start. One of the things is, of course, picking up on the red flags. If the person uses the word only, I am the only person who can help you, then you need to actually go pick up your wallet, your phone, and leave. That you're done. If the person also says, I promise, you need to collect your things and go.
Okay, this is very good. This is very specific things to watch for. Yeah.
And also, if you have particular questions and you're not getting them answered, like how long do you think this is going to take? A person might not know, but they need to say that. Like, well, it could take a month, it could take a year, I don't know, but we'll check in with each other as it goes on. I'll tell that to my clients because I don't know. We're not dealing with something that has a perfect trajectory. You're dealing with human emotion and healing. But I'll answer the question. If a person says, that's not for you to know, that's for me to decide, also head for the door.
Okay.
Because they'll then be in charge of how long you need to keep coming back to see them. It's not a conversation. It always needs to be a conversation. You always need to maintain your power in that room, in that space. And if the person is at the first meeting taking it away, well, that's not for you to decide. You don't have any say. You want to feel that as a red flag.
Makes total sense.
The other thing that is hard, though, is sometimes the person who you meet with seems like the best person ever, the best person you've ever come across, and they're love bombing you, and it feels magical. And one of the things that's hard is to be cautious about those moments when it seems too good to be true. When it seems too perfect, too rehearsed, too manipulated.
Okay.
Most people don't pick up on that, though, because they're kind of in the enjoyment of the moment.
New, what is that? New relationship energy? Right.
Right.
Whoa,
Yeah.
it's so wonderful. Oh my God, I love everything about this thing.
Sometimes call it blinding bliss. Right? You're in it and, oh, this feels so perfect and good. And you can't wait to meet with this person again. And you believe what they say about how they can cure you of whatever it is. You don't want anything to crash that party. You don't want anyone to be critical of it. In fact, you might get angry about someone wanting to be critical of it when you tell them how wonderful and perfect it was and how you can't wait to come back. But I say this because I want the people out there to have that moment where they think, was this too good to be true? Was this just a little too perfect? Because people who are manipulating you are very good at manipulating you. And they will read exactly when you've looked away for a moment, and they'll know that that means they have to catch you back. And so you'll feel understood and heard, but no, they're just reading your face, and they're really good at it. And they need for you to need them, and they need for you to come back. When I first, I'm not saying that I do it perfectly, but I've learned because of a lot of my clientele that I ask them to ask me questions. And I encourage them to tell me when I've gotten it a little off or a lot off. Because that's the only way I have the information I need to be able to help them. I value that. But that's one of the other signs. if the person you're working with cannot tolerate you being critical of what they're doing, or even saying, well, that's sort of it, but that's not exactly it. And they say, no, that is it. You just don't realize it. Right? That's what manipulating you will do, because they can't be wrong. It's not my job to be right. It's my job to help you. It's my job to offer you information based on the information I'm given by you. So if I say something is blue and you know for a fact it's green, I want to know that. If something, I'm assuming something bothered you because it might bother other people, and you say, no, actually that didn't bother me, I want to know that.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps tailor make how I can help you. But if you're meeting with someone who cannot tolerate those moments and clearly makes you wrong, and also makes you wrong for even saying it, then that's the time for you to go.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So these are just little red flags or warning signs. Are there any questions a person could ask on their first visit with someone that might make some of these things stand out a bit more clearly? You know, again, we can't ask too much of people who, you know, are, again, they're in vulnerable state, they're reaching for help, they're hoping that this therapist will be a good fit for them. So we don't want to put so much armor on them that we prevent help from happening, but we just want people to know what they're doing and what they're going into. So are there questions they could ask or something like that?
Right. Okay. Yes, there are questions. And it's also true that sometimes you don't know what questions to ask until you've met with the person a few times and you're starting to wonder, or something's kind of rubbing you the wrong way. But no matter when you ask it, I think some very good questions are, especially if you've been involved in a very controlling, highly controlling relationship where you felt like you were under that person's control, or that you came from a cult experience, to ask the person who is supposed to be treating you if they've had any experience with that, if they know about relationships with narcissists, if they know about the fallout from that, if they know about what kind of treatment you might need because of that, if they know about cults, if they believe in mind control. That's been a problem for people who I've seen who said that they had a therapist who didn't believe in it, who didn't think that anyone could be controlled in that way. And a lot of people I've seen too have said that for quite a long time. So on their time and their dime, they've had to spend time educating their therapist.
Right.
And even trying to convince their therapist that these things exist. I see that as a great frustration for a lot of people. They shouldn't have to be the ones in the teaching role, even though I know sometimes it happens that because there's so few of us who do this work, yes, naturally it's going to happen that you're in the teaching role, as long as you feel like your therapist is willing to do most of the work. Like, here's some books, therapist person. Please read them so that you can help me. So that on their time, if they really care and if they're really open to this idea that cults exist, that controlling relationships exist, that mind control exists, let them do the work. I've done that with clients who have been, like the first client I had who had PTSD from wartime. That was not a population I had worked with before. So I started doing my research about trauma, about that diagnosis, about the after effects. That's so I can be more present and available and good for that client and able to help them. But it shouldn't be that they're paying to teach me on their time.
Right, that's right.
So you want to find out, does this therapist believe you when you even say that you were involved in a cult? One of the things that's also important to note is that there's some people who will think that they have been abducted by whatever, and they're just psychotic. Not just, I mean, that's a major disorder. But it's not a cult situation. And for other people, they're labeled psychotic and told to go on medication because they're talking about BTs and clusters, right? Sort of
Right.
Scientology terminology. And it sounds psychotic, but it actually came from an actual tangible source. They're not crazy. They're just citing something that sounds that way.
Right.
So that's why you want to make sure that your therapist is in line with where you are so that they don't misdiagnose you.
Yeah, I would imagine that the last thing you would want in coming out of something like Scientology would be to go get counseling from somebody who doesn't know anything about Scientology, because they're not knowing anything about it. Yeah, you're going to have to school them, but also they're going to make, that's a really good point, they're going to make misevaluations about some of the stuff you're saying, when really all you're saying is, well, is what L. Ron Hubbard taught you. This is not your ideas. This is L. Ron Hubbard stuff, right?
Right. You're just quoting.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're going to sit there and go, what? He said what? And you thought, what? And they're not going to have any clue about the context of it. And I would imagine the same would apply for any of these groups. Mm-hmm. That you're going to want a therapist who either knows or is going to, like you said, take the time to find out where you're coming from.
Right. And I think, yeah, go ahead. I was just going to add to the list of, if that's okay, to just jump in about what else to try to ask about as much as possible. The other thing that I think is important is that sometimes therapists have certain leanings, whether they're social leanings, political leanings, religious leanings, that they're not upfront about, but it kind of seeps into the work. Where you find out that your therapist is anti-abortion because of how they feel about the fact that you had one or you're thinking about having one, which shouldn't be part of the therapeutic relationship. It should be that if you're having feelings about it, the therapist addresses your feelings. They don't address their own, and you shouldn't have to address their feelings about it. If they're pro or against any kind of alternative lifestyle, or if they're coming from a certain religious perspective and they just haven't been upfront about it. And I think it's really good to find out about that ahead of time. Like, how are you going to feel about my family? And how are you going to feel about the fact that I've made these decisions? And are you going to guide me away from those things because of your leanings? Can you please be honest with me about that? That's, I think, another way you can make a fully educated decision about who to work with.
Good point. Yeah. Which actually reminds me of something, because I know that there are, for example, there are people who come out of religion. Now, I'm not talking about destructive cults. I'm talking about like religion in general, right? They go from being a Christian to an atheist or something, and they want to get some counseling or something, and they go to a Christian counselor who starts talking God to them. That might be a bit inappropriate in that situation. You're going to want to make sure that the biases aren't entering into the therapy room, I guess.
Right. It has to feel safe. You have to be able to feel like you can be fully open, or it's not going to work. Right. And in a cult, you already have to hide so much about yourself to be accepted, your urges, especially if you're in a Bible-based group. And so to go into therapy that's supposed to help you and feel that you have to keep a large part of you hidden there too, what's the point of going?
Precisely, exactly. That's a great general, idea of how it should look and feel. Is, can you be completely open, express yourself in any way you want, and it's going to be acceptable.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Those are very good. Now, you have had, through your own, through the people that walk through your door, you've had instances where people have been in some bad therapy situations, or not even therapy, but other situations where they were getting counseling or coaching, right? Life coaches, who are not even licensed people, right? What's been some of your experience with that?
Okay, so I've had, unfortunately, so much experience with that because there's so much fallout from that.
Mm.
Um, and it's growing. Um, and because I think there are more people out there saying, oh, I can do this, but they don't have a therapeutic background and they haven't studied human psychology and they don't know about trauma uh, from kind of brain development and changes and physiological changes and sort of the inner workings. But they went to a seminar at the hotel in Santa Monica, and so they are now experts, right? Like, oh, but it happens less often with licensed therapists, although it does sometimes happen, and that's why it's good that you're going over that too, sort of how to keep yourself safe in every situation, even
Mm-hmm.
if someone does have a license and they have initials by their name and they have a license number and they have a board that oversees them, they sometimes can still have the need to be needed to such a great degree that that overrides their professionalism.
Mm.
Their narcissism or psychosis is so rampant that they will get their clients involved in feeding their ego or joining in with their psychosis. Um, and so, yeah, just because someone's licensed doesn't mean they're good. I mean, we've all been to doctors, some were better than others, right? It's naturally going to happen, but it gets to the point of being potentially dangerous when you just let it happen, especially because the person is licensed. And then you have all the others who are the healers, um, the spiritual coaches or life coaches. The
Mm-hmm.
spiritual coaches are the ones that make me more nervous. The channelers, the
Mm.
ones who are in a or sort of doing the pseudo science, who are sitting kind of in the chair of the therapist, but without having the know-how of doing therapy and how to do it and what signs to watch out for and how to do it in a healthy way. I'm not saying that a bulk of these people don't mean well. I think they do. I think they do want to help. But because these are all unregulated fields, there is no safety net. There's no system of checks and balances. There's, for most of them, not a board that oversees them. So there's no one to complain to even if something bad
Right.
happens. So you're really at their mercy. And so that's why you want to be able to know what to watch out for, um, because they just might not know at all what they're doing and how to handle your feelings and what you're going through. And so a lot of these people also tend to be very kind of techniquey. So
Mm.
they'll use objects and or techniques that they say have sort of healing or magical powers. Um, and again, there's nothing wrong with crystals. I think crystals are beautiful. There's nothing wrong with holy water. You could sprinkle it on me all you want. I don't care. Fine. It's just how it's used and why it's used. And if you're made to feel like somehow, unless you do this the right way or unless you do it through them, that they're the ones who need to use this technique with you, and you can't get helped if anyone else does it with you, then that's when I have a problem with it, because that's just breeding dependence, and that's not helping you at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, because it's all sort of this invisible science, not unlike regular therapy, it's invisible. Um, because of that, people can take it far afield and they can make
Mm.
promises that they're clearing your whatever energy blockage or balancing your chakras, or they can see the spirit of the ascended masters in you, or whatever they say. And again, that's not inherently bad, but if they say to you, and the only way you're able to do that, now that I've convinced you you need that, is through me,
Right.
through you paying me, coming back to my seminars, coming back to my office, letting me dictate everything in your life. Because often these people cross many boundaries and they'll tell you how often you need to come in, how much to spend, when you're done, who you can date, who you should remain married to or not, usually based on how the person you're married to feels about what they're doing. It's usually the litmus test. And because it's all invisible, it's based a lot on the sort of placebo effect.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you know you're done? And how do you know that if this person says, I see a spiritual blockage in you, and you say, oh, and that means that you need to pay me $4,000 more and come to see me for 5 more years, and then hopefully we'll be able to fix you.
Right.
You know, how is that really helping you, or how is that just making you dependent?
Now, let's talk about, is now that we're like scaring the hell out of everybody, let's talk about some of the positives of this too, right? Like, when do you walk into a therapist's office, or after your first interview or second session or third session, what are the signs or indicators that it's going right, that you're on the right path and that what you're doing is actually helpful?
I think it's a great question. I think for a lot of people, when they feel heard, when they feel like the other person didn't jump to conclusions and wasn't judgmental and really heard them and cared about what they were saying, then I think already it's going well. I think also what's important is for the therapist to have the client participate. Like, did this feel comfortable for you?
Mm-hmm.
Was there something you wanted to ask me? Is there something I did that you were not happy about? So again, starting that kind of conversation of a sense of equal power in the room. It's on purpose, and maybe I've mentioned this before to you, but it's on purpose that I have an armchair in my room that's slightly lower than the couch that my clients sit on.
Oh.
And I do that for a visual so that I'm not the one in charge and you can question me, especially because of a lot of the clients I work with who are going to be triggered by that and who are going to feel they're in then a submissive role. And I'm going to be given way too much leeway, way too much power, and I'm going to sense it and it's going to make me uncomfortable. So I do that so that people know I'm working for them. They're hiring me for a service. I don't speak for God, and I don't channel anyone else. I'm just there listening to them. The other way that I think that therapy can feel really good and respectful is when the therapist says to the client after the first session, would you like to come back? Do you want to go home and think about it? As opposed to, I need to see you, twice more this week, and let's set up regular sessions because you need this and I'm going to offer you this. And I think it needs to be conveyed if you think someone's in danger, that they need to come back right away because they're putting themselves in a situation where they really are in danger. And you need to help really move them into taking care of themselves. But barring danger, it should be the client's choice when they come back, if they come back, based upon if they're comfortable with you. So much of what happens too is in the nature of the fit between the therapist and the client. Sometimes you could be a perfectly good therapist, but your personality kind of reminded them of this third grade teacher they hated, and so they're going to have this kind of counter transfer. It happens. It happens. And so that's why you don't want to push a client and decide for them when they need to see you and how often they need to see you. Have it come from them. Some people are uncomfortable with that, though, because that's almost too much empowerment early on. They want to give that over to you. And then with my clients, I will say, you don't seem to have an answer. Maybe you're uncomfortable with that question. Do you want to go home and think about it? Or do you want me to decide for you this time? And part of what we can work on is helping you feel more comfortable involving yourself in decisions about yourself. And that becomes part of the work.
Right. Okay, good. So For you as a counselor and therapist, and from what you've obviously been doing this for a lot of years, you've talked to a lot of other therapists, you've seen a lot of people come in. What's the goal of therapy? When people are coming in, and I'm going to narrow this to people who are coming like from a destructive cult situation, whether it was a one-to-one cult or Scientology or JWs or some strange acting class where the teacher was some cult leader, like what we've heard about all these things.
Yes.
And we have the martial arts cult, next deal, I'm waiting to hear about the shopping cult, it's just, there could be like all kinds of whenever people get together in groups, there is a possibility of this. So it really isn't limited by religion, but
no, not at all. And I've heard everything. Yeah, there's a running cult where they do races.
Yes.
I mean, it can come in every form.
Yes. So regardless of that, right? Let's just talk a little bit about the goals of the therapy, because for myself, when I first came out of Scientology, and I remember thinking this, a year from now, everything's gonna be great. I'm gonna be, and I haven't done, this kind of therapy that we're talking about. I've just done my channel and my education and talking to you and stuff like that. But I had this idea that after a year, my head would be clear of all this stuff and everything would be fine. And I've come to learn for myself, kind of an unrealistic goal, kind of not very grounded in reality kind of situation. I'm 4 years out now, and I'm like, I'm going to be doing this for quite a while in terms of never having another nightmare, or never thinking in those terms anymore, or I'm never going to look at the world as through the Scientology eyes. No, I find myself doing that all the time. And as time goes on, and as I become more and more educated, I have found that that really what's changed is my ability to catch myself has improved. And then you kind of check it and go, okay, is this me? Is that Hubbard? What is, what's what? And then move on. But that's me. I don't want to project my ideas onto everybody else. So from your point of view and from your practice, how does this all work?
Right. So I think the goal of therapy, and again, I can only speak from my perspective, but the goal of therapy to me is similar to the goal of good parenting. That you help the person not need you anymore. Right? You help the person become independent in this world. If they want to come back and visit, awesome. I do think about clients I've had you haven't seen for years, who I still think about their stories and wonder if everything was okay, and if they got over the loss of whatever it was. And, they rummage around in my mind. But I'm so happy when they're done, yay. I want like balloons to fall from the ceiling when they feel ready to go. And similar to, being a parent with my 3 kids, I love seeing them. I love spending every moment with them, but I also love when I can see that they're able to do things for themselves and move on and do whatever they want to be doing in their lives. The goal of really good therapy, I think, beyond having the person not need you to that same degree anymore, is giving them the tools to use, just like you were saying. What can you do for yourself when you're having those nightmares? And what can you do when you're seeing things through the lens of your time in Scientology? In that moment, filling up someone's toolbox and helping them with either relaxation techniques or being able to, because we practiced it in the office, how to say certain things to certain people, how to understand why they're having the nightmares and not feel scared by them, but just understand that they're memories of a time that they're no longer having to live through. And also feeling deserving. A lot of people who come to therapy are suffering from a lot of bad experiences or depression.
Pardon me.
Or that's okay, or anxiety, and they don't feel very deserving of having a good life or being happy. And and they let themselves be taken advantage of to a certain degree, even though I think within cults, people aren't letting it happen. It's a science that's being applied to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even if they let someone, push them around in their life outside of a cult, or they let their spouse treat them a certain way because, well, this is, they don't deserve anything better and they wouldn't be able to get anything better anyway. To move people out of that negative self-talk so they feel like they can kind of step into their life with both feet and say, okay, what kind of happy life can I have now? Because I feel more deserving of it. And I think also being self-aware, teaching people to notice when feelings are coming up inside of them. We learn to ignore that. And to a certain degree, that's how we get along socially. People just don't say whatever comes to mind or whatever they're feeling at any given moment. We learn to hold back. But in some fundamental moments, we ignore the things we shouldn't. And so we don't protect ourselves when we could have. We don't see the red flags, or we at least don't, we see them, but we don't want to see them because we're hoping that relationship is as good as we're imagining it is.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there have been like wild red flags, like the person manufactures red flags, and so helping the person you're working with become aware of what's coming up for them, and listening to it, having their voice wherever it registers be louder than the person who's trying to convince them of something.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of practicing in my office, because you can teach people skills, but they haven't used them and they haven't tried them. So doing role play sometimes is a very helpful thing. It's what we do if we're honest with ourselves. Just think of how many times we've had a conversation with ourselves in the mirror, and right, fully out loud, right? And the only thing that heard it was our dog, and the dog didn't care, and the dog doesn't speak English, right? But that's us practicing, because there's something that we know we need to actually hear ourselves say it out loud so that we can feel more comfortable saying it out there to whomever we're talking to. And so I think it all boils down to the intention. And it's a word I wanted to mention because I think it's integral here.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to someone who is a healer who might be fine, to distinguish them between a healer who's fine and a healer who's not fine is all about the intention. A coach who's fine, a coach who's not fine, a channeler is fine, a channeler is not fine, a licensed therapist or whatever else. I think that the intention of it all is integral to keeping yourself safe as well. There are going to be some people who are non-mainstream counselors, healers, helpers in some way, who, again, might be perfectly good and helpful and healing, and insightful and curing of certain emotions. But some of them also, I've noticed, have a kind of an East versus West way of looking at things. And they will sometimes, and this is something to watch out for, they'll sometimes encourage you to not seek medical care, or they'll encourage you to go off your medications. And it has happened that people have become very ill or have died when they were told to just bathe in specially blessed water instead of taking, or instead of going for their cancer treatment, right? And so you want to be able to understand in that moment that the intention for that person is probably to share what they think is true. But also you want a therapist who has the flexibility to be what I call both and. Where if your treatment is helping you, don't interfere with that. Keep going for your whatever it is, radiation or something, even if there's a part of it that is toxic to your system, but it's still helping you. You as a therapist or you as a healer, coach, channel, or whatever, can add to that, can add by making the person feel calm or by healing them in other ways, but don't keep them from getting the help that they're already getting somewhere else just because you've been convinced that that treatment is wrong. If the evidence is there that so far they're actually getting help from it, don't get in the way. And if you have a person who you're going to see who tells you to not take the medication that you think is actually helping you, or to not go back for whatever treatment, or to not see your family, even though you love your family, just because they think that that family is toxic and they kind of want to be the only people you go to emotionally, then these are all warning signs. And so their intention is off. Their intention is self-guided.
Okay.
Their intention is not for you, because they're ignoring the evidence in front of them.
Okay, good. Very good points. And I think a commonality to a lot of what we're talking about here is, noticing or seeing, frankly, destructive cult characteristics in a therapist situation. The us versus them, I'm the only one who can help you, the authoritarian slant, this kind of thing, the dependency situation. So it would really then behoove people, I think, to, my fallback position, I guess, is I'm just going to, is my mantra really is get educated, be educated, get yourself educated on the situation you were in and what happened to you, and, so as to proof yourself up to not fall into such a situation again. So let me ask you, this is just something I've just sort of like thrown out there from day one because that's what's worked for me so much. But how much of that plays a role in what you do or what you've seen other therapists do?
How much of what plays a role?
Education.
Right. What I often do and what other therapists will often do is offer their clients resources. Like, my voice needs to not be the only one in your healing, unless my ego needs for that to be, and if so, you shouldn't be coming to see me.
Right.
And I should not be in practice. But I will often have a reading list for clients if they like to read, or audio book, or your videos, or other people's videos.
Yeah.
People who are talking about different subjects that can be helpful to them. And also just to let me know also if there are things that they've come across, articles. Clients send me videos all the time they come across, or TED Talks that they think are helpful. They want me to see them too, or read them too, because it was really helpful and they think it will be helpful in their treatment. So they participate in that way. And I love that. Or sometimes it's just information that they want to give me that I can share with other people. It's not something that affects them, but they think it might affect some of my other clients. Again, that conversation. But I think, when you walk into, let's say, I'm thinking of a particular cult group that I went to go visit one time just to see what they were up to, and you go through their library, and every book and every tape is by the same person, by the leader. And so I think to counter that, you want to have other voices, other scholars, other people who have helped other people in the past with this, and have your client learn from them as well. And I think that that's being respectful to your client and helping them see that there are other sources of information. And other sources that also might help them more than what you can provide, because that it could be that they speak in a similar language to what the client really likes and what speaks to their heart, or the person's had more specific experience with people from that particular group. Go learn from them and get educated. It's very empowering, but it also helps move them towards that independence, which should be the goal.
Right. Okay, good. And something I wanted to make sure that I asked you was, lay people, people recovering, people coming to see counselors and whatnot, there's all kinds of therapeutic techniques and practices that different therapists have found varying degrees of success with. And so sometimes I imagine people might be asked to do things when they're getting counseling, imagine things, talk about certain things, write things down. in child therapy, there's dolls and there's toys and things like that. And some of these things make a lot of sense. Maybe sometimes you might be asked to do something that maybe doesn't make a lot of sense to you. Where's a line that maybe a person should draw as to, okay, I'll talk about my, I'll talk to you as though I'm the cult leader or something. Okay, fine, I'll do that. But I'm not going to do Primal Scream, right? How far should they be willing to go without understanding what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, I have so many things to say about that. Okay. First, there are some therapists who are very technique dependent.
Okay.
I'm not technique dependent because I think then what that does is it makes it seem like if you're not getting helped, you're just not doing the technique right. Like somehow the technique is perfect, and if it's not fixing you, then you're not doing it the right way or enough or whatever, which is also very culty, right?
Yep.
It's your fault.
Yep. You bet. Very much so. Yeah.
I'm cautious to not do that, but I think just in general, the question in general about therapy, there are therapists who are so who are trained in one way of doing it, so they keep applying that because that's what they know. And it's sort of similar to people who find that they had to fit sort of what the therapist was doing, and they had to kind of change even things they focused on in therapy because they could tell that the therapist was most interested in those things only or had a treatment for those things only. Sort of like if I produced Prozac and then because I had that pill Prozac, I needed all of my clients to be depressed suddenly, right?
That's right. Well, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail.
Right, exactly. And then you are beaten down like a nail, right? Because that's all you can focus on. And and also people who are in the position where they feel they need to please the therapist, which is part of that, just sort of the socialized behavior of it, then they'll just keep talking about those things that make the therapist happy because they have a technique for it. The other thing, though, that can happen is that sometimes therapists will have a particular thing that maybe helped them or helped other people, but it's for sure not going to help you because it triggers you wildly, or it's really not getting at the root of for whatever reason, it's not for you. You need to be able to say no and to say at least, well, can you tell me more about this and how it helps me before I do it? Because you don't have to say yes before you fully understand what you're about to be asked to do and why, and what the goal of it is, and also what the potential harm of it is. And again, being able to make a fully educated decision. And if you say, no, I'm not willing to do rebirthing, then have the therapist, if the therapist is okay and kosher, so to speak, the therapist will say, okay, cool, it's not for you, whatever, it's for some people, fine. But if the therapist says, oh, but that's the only way we can get at the whatever, again, grab your stuff, bye-bye.
Yeah, hit the road, Jack.
Right. So I do think that you want to always have that freedom and sense of freedom that you can ask the questions you need to ask to find out why you're asked to do something. There have been techniques throughout the ages that some have been great and some are not. And there was also this kind of misunderstanding of the techniques where the more intense the reaction was, somehow the more helpful it was to you. The louder you screamed, or the more you regressed, or whatever it was. But no, that's not necessarily the case. That just means that you had a larger reaction triggered in you, which gave the impression of having a bigger cure or it making a bigger impact. But it actually could have just been more traumatizing.
Yes, for sure. It reminds me of Scientology a little bit, Oh, I blew so much charge. It's like, okay, thank you. Not helpful.
Right.
Okay.
Not helpful, right.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
And I think also therapists can be trendy, right? So how many times a day do you hear mindfulness, right? Or being mindful? So mindfulness and being mindful, that's been called different things also for, I think, since the beginning of time, that people thought about things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were mindful. And so it's been called awareness, and it's been called a lot of things. Now it's being called mindful and mindfulness. So is there anything wrong with mindfulness? No, of course, it's fantastic to be mindful. But people are using that as their technique or their way, to a great degree, to make millions of dollars off of that. Same thing with ayahuasca. You know, there are a lot of groups that are taking this drug that for some people gives them, it's sort of like what people talked about LSD, or people still talk about LSD, kind of gives you this high. For some people, it makes them very sick. But there are some groups that will use it. It's kind of cool now. And it's been that way for like the last 10 years or so. And if you're with people who you're doing it safely with, I suppose it's okay. I also heard it can make you wildly nauseous. But for other people, they could be doing it with people who are using that as a way to kind of break you down, and then use that and use that sort of weakened state to manipulate you. So again, it's back to the intention.
Right. Okay, good. From your experience with this, well, I don't know. I mean, you know, your ability, you know what comes in through your door. So I don't want to, I guess I'm asking this because I don't want people thinking that, you know, they have to, again, armor up too much when they're seeking some counseling and some help, right? So, like, I guess I'm just going to ask your opinion on this is, what do you think is the percentage or chances of somebody running into something that might not be a good situation for them, therapy-wise or counseling-wise? How would you gauge or talk about that?
Right. It's pretty rare that it happens. But I think that's also because it's so specific. That's probably why I have sort of a self-selected group of clients who are dealing with this, because they've come to see someone who has this area of specialization.
Yeah.
So I see it more than other people are going to see it. And so, but I do keep perspective on it, that it's less than 1%. And kind of at worst, what you see with the other 99% is a therapist who's just not effective or annoying or too rigid or too bossy or doesn't stop talking, which is sort of how I'm feeling right now, even though you're asking me questions and I don't usually talk this much. I'm a listener. Anyway, but yeah, I think, yeah, at worst, it's like, nah, it just didn't do it, or, you know, or they just didn't get it. But I do think time and time again, I have seen the people who have said, I came out of a certain experience and I couldn't get my therapist on board with understanding it. And the other thing that happens for people who have been involved in cultic experiences is that sometimes they see that their therapist is kind of connecting with what they're saying like it's a movie of the week. Like they're fascinated and they want to hear more, kind of in a salacious way. And it doesn't feel like a therapeutic relationship anymore. So that's also something to watch out for. But yeah, it happens very rarely. But the reason I think we're talking about it is not so much that it happens, you know, so often, but that when it does happen, it can be so overwhelming and so damaging and last for a really long time, because you feel like you can't extricate yourself from this person who is controlling you and also dangling the carrot. That it takes your life totally off track for that period of time. And there's a way to prevent it. And that's why I'm glad you're bringing that up.
Okay, cool. Good. Yeah, because I don't, you know, because we want people getting the help that they need, right? And, you know, and it's already bad enough with Scientology, and I can't imagine Scientology is the only group that says psychotherapy is bad, psychiatry is bad, psychology is bad. They're all, you know, you walk into a psychiatrist's office and they can't wait to get the ice picks into your eyeballs and tear up your brains and this sort of thing. I tell you, you read enough Hubbard, that is exactly what you think. And
Yeah.
and he actually even made films that indoctrinate Scientologists on this, where they show I mean, it's ridiculous. They show this nice, pleasant office where, you know, a little girl comes in. This was a Scientology film, and the nurse, you know, gives the girl a little lollipop. Oh, we'll take very good care of her. And then she, you know, leads the girl into the back room where they got an operating table and these guys, there's blood on the floor, and they just can't wait to get this girl and throw her on the table and rip her brains out. And you're just like, what? And this is the portrayal of psychiatry and psychology to Scientologists. So I'm hyper aware of that group. I imagine there must be other groups that just by law of averages, there must be other groups that
Oh, yeah.
you know, will tell people, hey, you don't need that, you shouldn't do that. They're just a bunch of
Right.
brain surgeons or brain choppers or whatever. So we're already fighting a battle in you know, in getting people over the hump of their fears and uncertainties and doubts about getting counseling or therapy in the first place. You know, that none of that's ever stopped me. That's not, you know, but I understand that has been a thing. I've talked to a lot of ex-Scientologists about this. So I just wanted to sort of put out there at the end of this thing, you know, for people who are still watching, that's not the point of what this show was about. The point of the show was to educate a little bit more about how you can get some good help. You know, and
right, yeah, and what tools you need to keep yourself safe,
yes,
and to get the therapy and the help and the healing that you deserve to be getting. I think it's very important that the person you're going to for help should be qualified to do that and should treat you respectfully.
Yep.
And should provide what you are needing and what you're hoping to get. And if they can't provide it, they should say, I'm not the one you should be seeing. And you then can go elsewhere. That, again, would be very respectful. But yes, when you're involved in a cultic group or even a controlling relationship, you're usually barred from seeking counseling of any sort because they want to keep their control over you in-house. And it takes away their ultimate power. You might also start seeing the group as not being as great as they want you to perceive it. Or the person controlling you might be called out as a controller. It might empower you, God forbid. And it threatens the overall control. I mean, that when you're given a message like that, that's so strong, you want to consider the source and the reason for that message, even more so than the message itself at the time. Why does that person or why does this group need for me to believe that I'm going to be harmed if I talk to anyone else? Or I'm going to be harmed if I tell the secrets about what's happening in this group? You know, why do they need to have that control? How does that serve them instead of serving me?
Perfect. Well, we're going to be wrapping up here now because we've definitely I've gotten you to talk quite a bit. but I did want to check in and just see before we wrap up here, was there any other points on this topic that we haven't covered that you wanted to bring up or that you're still got on your mind on this?
No, I can't think of anything else. I mean, I think that, you know, it really is, it's a wonderful pursuit to get help for yourself. And part of the reason that I care about this is that I don't want, for people who have sometimes spent a long time before they sought therapy. In fact, I've heard from people, I had your number in my phone for 3 years before I had the nerve to call you. I was too scared, or I was too depressed, or I was too something, or I was worried that they were right, that if I went to a therapist, I'd be harmed, or if I shared the secret, something bad would happen to me. So finally you go to see a therapist. It should be a good experience. It should be the experience that you've been waiting for. And it should be one that renews your faith, your hope in being able to feel better. And it's not one that should take anything away from you, like your freedom or your say. And if it does, then you need to seek help elsewhere.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much for all that. So with that, we will wrap up for this week. Thanks a lot for doing this, Rachel. I really appreciate your time.
And that was Rachel. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to that and watching that as much as I enjoyed doing it, and found that useful, educational, and informative. Next week, we have another very, very interesting interview coming up on another topic that I think is quite the hot topic item right now in our political climate, and is not specifically having to do with Donald Trump. But it does have to do with something that I think you guys are going to be very interested in hearing about. And we're going to hear firsthand from someone from some boots on the ground views about some things regarding the topic of immigration and refugees. So tune in for that next week. In the meantime, thank you very much for coming around. Please leave any comments, critical or favorable or otherwise, in the comments section on my YouTube channel or at sensiblyspeaking.com on this podcast. And please do give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or whatever it is that you are listening to this. I very much enjoy getting your guys' feedback. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you guys next week.